Welcome to Writing the Wrong Way. This is a podcast for serious writers who want to develop their skills in artistry and stand out in a crowded industry by taking intelligent, creative risks. I'm your host, Jonathan Ball. I hold a PhD in literature. I'm the author of numerous books, and I take a very analytical approach to art making, emphasizing both efficiency and experimentation. So I'm here with Ryan Fitzpatrick. We're going to talk about the 95 Books Challenge, which is something that Ryan and I co-created a decade ago now, Ryan. It's actually the 10th year. We just finished the 10th year of doing it, which I didn't realize until I was just looking at the numbers. Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
So Ryan is the author of two books of poetry, and him and I edited a anthology of poetry as well. And he's doing a postdoc at the University of Toronto. Can you just maybe say something about your postdoc that you're doing right now? What are you up to?
I started this fall postdoc at U of T, but it's U of T, the Scarborough campus, which is weirdly more interesting than doing it at the...
That's the one that has more of the creative writing staff at it, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not doing creative writing, but
but it is where Tisdall and other people are at. Yeah,
and I know you're a big fan of his. Mm-hmm. He's a cool dude. I like that guy. But yeah, it's mainly like a research podcast, or not podcast. This is the podcast. This is a research postdoc. And so I'll be expanding stuff from my dissertation, which is all about like Canadian poetry and like space and geography. Thinking a bit about like what the relationship between Canadian poetics in a kind of really broad sense and Indigenous poetics in Canada is, but also like trying to like turn, as I keep getting told I have to turn my diss into a book. Yeah. That's the thing that has to happen.
Sure.
But like I'm also teaching a bit like out there.
You're given or in Toronto. Me and Ryan met in Calgary, and then he was in Vancouver for a while. And now he's out in Toronto. So he's poetry's taken you around the world.
around the world, if the world is Canada.
Around the world of poetry. The other thing I just want to quickly mention for you listening to this podcast is if you happen to hear I was just telling Ryan this before we got on, but if you happen to hear like my kid shouting in the background, that I'm ignoring him because all he's doing is singing the lyrics to Bingo. He's supposed to be napping, but he's just shouting the lyrics to B-I-N-G-O at like the top of his lungs. And I'm just hoping he's going to stop because he does it all the time. And, so if you think I'm ignoring my kid, it's like he doesn't need help. He just needs to go to sleep and stop singing Bingo.
So the fastest way to make that happen
to talk books.
is you need to take him to Bingo. And I understand, like, taking kids to Bingo is probably illegal in Manitoba. So I'd like to officially petition the Manitoba government to let kids go to Bingo again.
I feel like everything's legal in Manitoba. I don't know why that is, but it seems somehow like it would be legal. Oh, so again, we're going to focus this podcast on the 95 Books Challenge, which is a reading challenge that Ryan and I co-created. The basic idea of it is, you challenge yourself to read 95 books in a year. Ryan and I usually do the calendar year, but you could do any length of time. It doesn't really matter. Like if you could start, February 1st and end February 1st if you like. We just happen to do calendar years. But the idea is, 95 books in a year. Try to read that. There's a lot of people who do this now, more or less. If you go onto social media and check out the hashtag 95 books, you can, like the numerals 95 books. You can find actually a surprising number of people who do this thing now. And if you go to 95books.com, it's going to take you to the show notes for this episode and just a bunch of information about 95 books. And, you can download an ebook I've got, which called You Can Read 95 Books This Year. That just gives you some of my best tips for reading 95 books. I'm not going to get into like my tips for reading books necessarily right now, because again, you can just go download that and read if you want to read it. Me and Ryan are just going to kind of talk more about just doing it, kind of how we got into it and why we do it. And then we're just going to talk books for a lot of this, like some of the best books we've read. So, because we've been doing this for 10 years. I just did the numbers before we hopped on here, Ryan. 'Cause right now, as we're recording, it's December 13th, 2018. So since we started this in 2009, I've read 1,089 books, which is crazy. 1,089 books in 10 years. I actually failed one year. I did 78 books one year. But every other year, that was 2016. So again, even failing, I did 78 books. I read 78 books that year. The most I've done is I've read 140 books in 2011. And then the first year I did it, I read 119 books. And then this year, so far I've read 118. I'll probably read another one or two by the time the year's done. But if I don't, I hit 118 books. How about you, Ryan? How are you doing this year? Have you made your 95 books yet? Or
I've made my 95 books, which is good because, like, with you bragging that I failed one year. It's like I failed multiple years.
Did you?
Thanks,
I didn't think you had failed.
Thanks, PhD. You would think doing a PhD would mean you would read more, but just means you read more, but you only read parts of things. So I wasn't finishing anything.
Yeah.
So, like, I think most of the years of my PhD I did not finish. The years that I finished during my PhD, like, were the years that I did my field exams. I think both of those years, like, I cleared it by a really high bar. I think one year I came really close to like 200 books.
Yeah, you did. I remember, like, disgustingly. I mean, 140 is a lot, but that's almost double.
Yeah.
But like, oh no, sorry, you actually did double it one year. I remember.
Yeah, last year I was in the 70s. So, but this year I'm sitting at 103, and like you, I'll probably knock off one or two more. I'm in the middle of an Austin Clarke novel, and like you can read a poetry book in an hour, so I'll probably read two of those.
The other thing. I read a lot of poetry books, right? So like, I forget, I wrote all the numbers down, I lost them, but I, like, something like 50 of the books I read every year are poetry books, because I have to review 48 poetry books every year.
Yeah.
So I read at least that, if not, more than that. And, but like you also, I don't finish reading a lot of books. I just stopped reading a lot of them. That's I used to feel like compelled to finish reading a book because I was doing this challenge, and I decided that was no way to live.
Well, and that's and that's one of the reasons why why I was so happy to start doing this with you, is because before I started my MA, I wasn't finishing anything. Yeah. I was constantly reading 50 pages of a book and then putting it down and then forgetting it existed. So it forced me to finish things. And now, I'm in this habit so much that, it's really easy to, still rack up finishing a lot of books, but I just don't finish everything.
And that's, two things I want to just really briefly talk about. One is just, how we actually started this. So we started this, as I say, in 2009, which was when I was doing a PhD and Ryan was doing his master's degree. I hadn't started my master's yet. I think I was applying. Yeah, you were applying
to do my master's, and you were just finishing up.
And so I literally had a list of books I had to read. I had 100 books on a list, and I had to read all these books. And so I didn't have to do it in a year, but I wanted to do it in a year, basically. And so the thing around this time, I was despairing about all these books I had to read. I also ran across this article that Karl Rove had written in some newspaper, and it was about how George Bush had read 95 books in the previous year, and decimating or destroying Karl Rove in a contest they typically did. Apparently George W. Bush and Karl Rove would had a reading challenge that they would do every year or so, or at least these last couple of years, and Bush would just read an incredible amount of books and crush Karl Rove, although some years Rove won. And I remember reading this and thinking, again, if you don't remember George W. Bush, whatever your politics are, if you go back into history, the public perception of George W. Bush at the time was that he was a moron, which obviously isn't true. You remember when George W. Bush was that was the stupidest president you could think of. Yeah. Remember when that was a thing? They used to have Bush-isms, and they had calendars with all the dumb things Bush had said and stuff. And with maybe one exception, anybody who becomes president is not an idiot. Whatever you want to say about them otherwise. You know what I mean? But I was reading this, and thinking, Bush is the president of the United States. And he's reading more books than me. I'm a PhD student of literature, supposedly a writer. And so I kind of was all bummed out about it. And then basically off that's how we got the number 95, because the challenge is kind of read more or at least as much as George W. Bush's reads in a year. And then, you know, hopefully more than that if you're going to, you know, call yourself a writer. But then, like, the other thing you sort of mentioned is that, I mean, I think it sounds crazy to people. It's almost 100, which is a kind of a round number people use for challenges of this nature, but it's more than like a book a week. So it's more than 52. It's not quite 100. So like but it's kind of 100. Like it kind of seems, I think, on the surface of it, both crazy and manageable. But
Yeah.
the thing, like, I think
It basically works out to like 8 books a month.
yeah, something like that, which, you know, I don't know, it's not quite $2 a week, but it's kind of like, I don't know what you would call it, 1.7 or something. You'd have to do the math. But like, the thing that I found interesting about it is it actually was not as hard as I thought it'd be. Like, once you kind of make a decision, you're going to like read books and you're going to finish them, as you say.
Yeah.
I mean, I make a point not to finish every book I start. But at a certain point, I'll just decide, okay, am I going to finish this book or not? And like, I won't finish a lot of books, but like, it just has made me kind of a little, I found that just by paying a little bit of attention to what I was doing, just like a little bit of attention to, you know, what book I was reading, finishing a book before starting another one most of the time, and even just using like downtime to read, or time when I would maybe just do something else. Like instead of playing video games on my phone, I just deleted all the video games from my phone, and then I would read on the bus. And like just reading on the bus, like for, you know, I had like 40-minute bus ride both ways at the time. Like that alone, I read like 95 books, not even really doing much else. So, and I'm not a fast reader, so it does sometimes sound crazy to people, like read 95 books in a year, but honestly, it's not that crazy. It just sort of is something you have to kind of decide you're going to do or not do.
Yeah.
Like everything else in life. So you failed a couple times. Let me just
Like
ask
multiple
you.
times. I would have to go through, and I didn't know we
Even
were.
then, you still read more than you would have read, right? Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like I tell people, like it doesn't really matter. Like no one's gonna police you. People are always like ask for rules. Do you find that, Ryan? Like I find like people, one, they want to know, what happens if I fail? And I was like,
yeah.
Well, then I'll shoot you in the head. Like,
What's this
what am I
weird thing
supposed
where, like,
to say that?
Where
Nothing.
when we were starting it, we had all these conversations about, oh, what are the rules, what counts, what doesn't,
What counts
and we
as
set
a
up
book?
rules.
That's a big question. Yeah.
Yeah, we set up rules for ourselves.
Yeah.
But also, once we put it out there, like, people count things that I would never count. Like, some people count, like, poetry chapbooks. And I'm just like, that's too slim. That doesn't count. You might as well count.
Yeah.
I might as well be able to count every article I read online then.
Yeah, like I don't count the picture books I read my kids.
Yeah.
I counted one picture book this year, but that's it. I just literally, I'll just count like one picture book, and I'll just stand for metonymically for all the picture books I read. So like I counted one of the best books I read this year was a picture book, a kid's picture book by David A. Robertson called "When We Were Alone." Have you heard of this, Ryan?
No, I haven't.
So this is it's a kid's picture book, like I say, like for, you know, very young children, but it's about the residential schools taking kids.
Oh, okay.
And it's like this, it's, you know, elder sort of telling this grandkid about, you know, like he kind of writes around it a little bit. It's not super direct, but you know, pretty plainly talking about, you know, having been in a residential school, and that's why, you know, they don't speak Cree and so on. It's a beautiful, really fascinating little book. So I put that on my list. But I read, like, of course, 500 other kids' books.
Yeah.
You know.
But that's the thing. It's like, I think it's really up to like whatever you feel comfortable with, and whatever serves the goal of what you want to get out of it.
Yeah.
So if you want to read more poetry chapbooks or more kids' books, like, count them.
Do you have a goal of like that you want to get out of it? Because initially, I was just wanted to do my reading list, and and I wanted to be accountable. So we were like being accountable to each other. And we had a bit of a gamble of like the winner, whoever read more owed the other person, or got free sushi from the other person.
Yeah.
And then over time, I think you still owe me some sushis at this point.
Oh, probably, guaranteed.
Then, like, of course, I didn't have to do my PhD anymore, and I just kept doing it. And like my basic reason for doing it at that point was just to kind of keep up the habit of reading. But I've had years where I've tried to direct it a bit more. Like okay, I'm going to read more of this or more of that. But I find that every time I do that kind of thing, like I kind of just fall off the wagon and I just keep reading things. Like I read
Yeah.
pretty eclectically, which I don't think is a problem, but I
Yeah.
think, yeah, some people like want to use it, and it would be good, I think, to do this. Want to use it as like they're going to learn about X. Like I know a guy who he decided he was going to he just wanted to catch up on manga, all the manga he hadn't read. And so which of course is ridiculous. You know, they publish 8,000 those books every day or something. It's not that much, but it's like crazy amount of manga, right? But it, was just one of those ways he was just like, he wanted to like catch up in a particular field. Do you find like you kind of like are goal directed around it, or do you just kind of do what you want? Like you're doing a postdoc now and just came off a PhD, so I'm assuming you're a bit more directed, but.
Oh, I'm directed. It's kind of weirdly like not directed right now because I'm trying to be a bit exploratory. Like the reason I kept doing it is because I like tracking it.
Sure.
It's just it's really easy. I just keep like my notes open on my computer. Every time I finish a book, I just write it in, so it's just running list of books that I finish, and I like looking back at it like periodically. But I will say the one thing that I'm trying next year, and I've already started it, is I came off teaching this course, like this Canadian literature course, and when I was planning it, I realized, oh shit, I like don't know any novels.
Yeah, I don't
because I work on poetry, so like all the stuff I read is either poetry or like some kind of criticism, whether it's like theory or like or any kind of like critical academic text. I just don't read novels. So like one of the things that I'm going to try to do in order to like beef up any future courses that I get asked to teach is I'm going to try to read a novel a week. And that's been I started it in the past few months, and I've read like I finished a few things, and like it's been interesting like to kind of like deliberately read fiction in that way.
So what's the best book you read this year? You got your big running list. I keep the one like that too. What's the best thing you read this year? Or just the most interesting?
There's a few things that I could pull from. Maybe the most recent that is kind of like blowing my mind. It's like close to home to you. It's this book. This is me pulling from my pile sitting on my desk here. It's this book by Owen Taves, who's like a geographer, called "Stolen City: Racial Capitalism and the Making of Winnipeg."
Oh, really? That's interesting.
It's this academic text, but it's really approachable. So what he does in it is he starts. The book is kind of broken into two parts, and the first part is he tries to break down the development history of Winnipeg, starting with the treaties, and like the way he frames it is like a kind of clash of development visions, and thinking about the city through the idea of a development vision is very 20th, 21st century. So to apply it to like this earlier historical moment is really interesting. Because what you get is like the clash of the Canadian government coming in and wanting to like restructure the land around like agriculture, and then competing with the development vision of like of say, I think the example he gives is like the Anishinaabe, but like how they had a development vision too that is visible in the treaty making process, where they're like, well, we need access to at least 2/3 of this territory in order to, live. And the way that was kind of like basically plowed under, to use a terrible metaphor, but settler colonialism. So he goes through. I'll try to keep this a bit quicker than I want to, but he goes through the development history, like through like suburbanization, through kind of recent forms of like gentrification, and then the second half is really kind of focused on the present, and kind of maybe of interest to you and maybe people who are listening more than the geography stuff is one of the things he does in the back half of the book is he really interestingly picks up on the way poetry plays out in that. So there's a chapter where he spends a lot of time talking about
like prairie poetry and how, like, because it's so site and geographically specific and interested. That's interesting.
Yeah, but talking a lot about, like, he spends a lot of time talking about Marvin
I was
Francis
gonna say, does he get into Marvin
and
Francis?
Duncan McCurdy. Yeah, like those two specifically. But I think like
Sorry, and
that's
Duncan Mercury, you said?
yeah,
Okay, yeah, that's
like
interesting.
it's really excellent. And I picked it up because I saw it on Twitter, and like it's not a book that people are talking about.
Yeah, I
Although
haven't even heard of
presumably,
it. Is he from Winnipeg?
presumably, yeah. Well, I think he's at U of A now. I think he's doing a
Okay.
postdoc, and
Hmm.
this was his PhD dissertation that he did maybe at CUNY. So he wrote it in the States, but it's this whole thing about Winnipeg,
No, that's
and
fascinating.
it's really timely.
Marvin Francis, just as a weird aside, so the
Yeah,
book that he probably gets into is Marvin Francis's City Treaty, which is a great book. It's
which
book.
is
This
on
is
on my list this year because I taught it twice.
yeah. So you've read it already, then I guess I probably recommend it to you at some point. I'm sure if you hadn't already heard of it. But Marvin Francis, I did a class with him way back in the
Oh,
day,
really?
and I remember like he was one of the only people I ever met who tried to convince me not to buy his book. He was like, "Just go get it from the library." I'm like, "Oh no, I wouldn't mind buying it and like having a copy." And you know, one because I liked my books, but two,
Yeah.
support like a local writer. And he's like, just get it from the library. He's like, don't spend money on books. He's like, what are you doing? You crazy? He was a great guy, Marvin. But anyway, I say was because he died, relatively young. But that's really interesting. What was the name of that book again?
It's called "Stolen City: Racial Capitalism in the Making of Winnipeg," and it's by Owen Taves.
That's interesting.
That's really recent. That's out of 103. That's the 101st book I read this year.
Wow. The one I just
Well,
read
yeah,
is one of the best ones I've read so far this year, which is The Blue Clerk by Dion Brand. Have you seen this yet?
that book's great. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really interesting. I found it, this book is like, how would you describe it? Because I have having a hard time kind of just summarizing it in a sense. But to me, it's she subtitles it in Ars Poetica in 59 versos,
yeah,
and a verso is just like the left hand. If you're opening a book, there's you've got a page. Page has two sides, a recto and a verso. So the recto would be the odd numbered side facing you when you open a book, and then the verso is the if on the left hand, the sinister left hand side.
yeah,
And so the kind of conceit of this book is that you've got the author sort of divided into two figures, the author and then the clerk, this more kind of business like figure who is collecting these pages that the author produces and kind of moving them around, collating them, putting them where they might go, and so on and so forth. And the idea here being sort of somewhat that this clerk is gathering up these verso pages, these kind of unused left hand pages, which I think is some sort of play on the idea of them being sinister, but I'm not. It doesn't actually say that anywhere.
yeah,
In any case, it's a brilliant, weird, strange, interesting book. It kind of reads like a bunch of prose poems on just various subjects. Some of them are kind of like little mini essays on art. Some of them are just sort of more broad meditations on poetry and literature in general. A lot of it has to do with politics and the politics of power politics related to being a woman, for example. And it's really like a really interesting read in a lot of ways, and also just as an object, it's really a beautiful little object. It's got these two hard covers, front and back, and then where you would normally have a spine, they just haven't produced the spine. So like the spine is bare with this threading. It's really beautiful. But I was really impressed with that book. Dion Brand's always good, but I thought that was one of the best ones I've read by her, actually.
it's really excellent. And I think if it's not on my list, it's because like I think like for me, like saying, "Oh, that Dion Brand book is excellent," is like
Yeah.
almost like obvious thing to say at this point. But like the thing that I think is interesting about that book is that it's almost like if you take that kind of like that exchange between author and clerk as if they're kind of two sides of Dion Brand as writer. So the author is the person who produces all these like polished works that come out. It's almost like the the Blue Clerk is like this kind of tour through the concerns of all her previous books by thinking about all the things that had to get left out.
Yeah, and I think it's almost explicitly that, I just it's a fascinating book in that regard, especially because even though it has it's interesting to me because it doesn't have a spine, like literally the book object doesn't have a spine, but in other ways it kind of functions like a spine across these other books of hers. So I think it's really, I was really impressed by that book in a lot of regards. Although my favorite poetry book this year was The Nonnets by Erin Gio.
Well, that book's great too.
I read it like 3 times this year. It's so great. and I can't even really describe that book. It's just a beautiful, funny, strange little book of 9-line poems that he calls Nonnets.
It's really sad too,
it's
though,
very
right?
Sad.
Like it's kind of really, it's a book about depression in a lot of ways, but it's like, it's formally very slight.
But it's
like
deceptively
subtle,
slight. Like it's deceptive.
Yeah.
If you look very closely, like it's incredibly well-constructed book that seems tossed off in certain respects. It's very, I like I say, I read like 2-3 times this year. I read it at least twice. I want to say I read it 3 times, but I'd have to double check.
But maybe it's one of these books that like I really loved, and I've seen Aaron read from it, that I think maybe has been ignored a bit this year because it looks so tossed off.
I think you're probably right. I mean, it certainly didn't get like the attention that I thought it might get, given how good his first book was, and how much of a jump this book is. Like, it's so much better, even though I liked his first book quite a lot. And as you say, like I think it, though, I could see where if you weren't paying close attention, like there's a beautiful poem in it that has, where he imagines a scene, like somebody having coffee in the morning, and then it moves into, oh no, that was a commercial I saw for a coffee.
Yeah.
And it, like, that kind of structure seems very joke-like, but then he kind of brings it back to like the sadness of this whole scenario and how confusing one for the other. But it's very, as I say, it's very subtle and like it seems very light. But it has and it's got a lot of real complex, like formal play going on, and word construct. Even just the sonic qualities of certain lines are really subtle and smart. It's just a brilliant book. But I think it's kind of I think he's kind of in that category, which I know, of like being a writer's writer in a certain respect, and I don't know if it's easy to kind of see what he's doing, which, it just is what it is. But I wish he ought to get a bit more attention from that book. I thought it was, again, I read like 50 books of poetry a year minimally, and it was the best book of poetry I read this year, other than maybe the Dion Brand book, which, is Dion Brand. Like you say, you're kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's brilliant. Let's move on with life. Dion Brand's brilliant. Anyway, what else you got on your list of like your top reads?
Like speaking of maybe poetry books that like feel a little slight, but I suspect are way deeper than they are. I just finished a review of this that may or may not come out somewhere. I don't know, but it's this book by Adrian de Leon called Rouge, which I only knew about because I'm working at U of T Scarborough, and he's like a U of T Scarborough alumni. I went to a launch up there like a couple months ago, and so this book is it's this weird eclectic book where each poem centers around one of the subway stations in the TTC in Toronto. So starting west with the Kipling station, and then moving all the way east to a station that doesn't exist yet, which is Rouge Station, which is this kind of like weird composite virtual space that speaks to debates in Toronto right now of like, should they extend the subway into Scarborough more? But it's this book that's like formally diverse and seems because of that seems a bit like workshopy. It feels like, oh, this is something that this guy wrote in a workshop where he was asked to do a bunch of exercises, but also hangs together in a weird way. And asks these questions about spaces in the city and how we narrate them and how we kind of attach stereotypes to those spaces.
It's so weird. I didn't read that book, but I read a book called "Everyone Rides the Bus in a City of Losers" that also came out this year or just late last year. I want to say
Okay.
this year, by Jason Freer, and it's almost the exact same idea in
Oh,
Montreal.
really?
It's like bus stops in Montreal, and like it's it sounds very different in terms of how the poems turned out.
Yeah.
Like his has a kind of some other concerns. He has this quote on the back about I guess something Tyler comes to something Margaret Thatcher once said, which is that like if you were still riding the bus by a certain age, you were obviously a loser. you know, but it's so weird that it goes to show that like those ideas are just in the air sometimes.
Yeah.
So that is it very much a sequence, like riding from this place to this place.
Yeah, and they're kind of, it's almost like these interlaced serial poems where the poems don't have a formal consistency to them, but things he does on page 3, like a formal trick he pulls on page 3 might pop up later on page 20.
Oh wow.
Like that kind of thing. Um, yeah, no, it's really interesting. And that eclecticism feels like it hurts it, but the more like it's not the best book of poetry I've read this year, but maybe it's the one I've thought the most about,
Sure.
which I think also says something about it. Yeah, like I think he's a writer to watch out for. Like I think whatever he does for his next book will be really great. So
The one I thought was kind of like that, like where it was parts of it were really brilliant, and other parts I wasn't as enamored with, but I found it really kind of fascinating. Was this book called "Real is the Word They Use to Contain Us" by this No Awareness, which is a pseudonym for somebody.
okay.
No awareness, and
Oh God, now you say it out loud.
yeah, and anyway, it's this weird book. It's kind of has this frame. It's a bunch of different disparate poems, but there's like this weird framing poem that kind of goes across it. It's almost like a frame narrative, and the frame narrative is about. It's like a retelling of the Velveteen Rabbit, but as if by H.P. Lovecraft. Like
Okay.
like this nightmarish dialogue between a gun and the stuffed rabbit that was shot, and like it's just a bizarre, like weird nightmare of a book, and it's very interesting and strange and brilliant. And yeah, like and No Awareness, I guess, is done in novel as well, which I haven't seen yet.
Okay.
But otherwise, is just like this weird punk figure who doesn't use his name and doesn't doesn't really like to publish books. Like his first book is you can get his first book from a publisher. I think I forget who put it out all of a sudden. This book came out of Biblioasis, but if I remember right. But his first book, like you can either buy like a bunch of papers stapled together by him that he like just sew into a book
Yeah.
for you, or you can buy it from a publisher. Like he like reserved the right to just sell like a copy he made out of his van, kind of thing. It's such a weird, interesting. But anyway, I've never seen a book like it. It's one of those things where it's like,
Okay.
yeah, I read some books that I thought were better this year, but I thought it was very good, but I haven't actually seen a book like it, which is Blue Clerk was like that too. Nonet's in a different way, but at least with Nonet's you can like look at his earlier book, and same with John Brand to a certain degree. This one, I can't really give it like the closest thing to it is this horror author called Thomas the Gaudy, who like nobody has heard of, but yet is this massive weird cult figure. So anyway, kind of a very kind of strange, interesting thing as well. What else did you read that you thought was really notable this year? Or did you ever read anything really weird like that? Maybe you didn't even know if you should count. Or
No,
just
because like
pretty standard?
I'm happy counting things. Like if they're weird, like that's not. Um,
I never know about screenplays. Like I read screenplays sometimes, and I never like. I'm sure like, should I count this screenplay? Because it is like, it's like 100 pages printed out. But then at the other hand, like I literally am printing it out from the internet. Like it doesn't exist ever, like in a physical form, really. So
Yeah,
I never know.
I've counted manuscripts before, where a friend will
Yeah.
hand me a manuscript and I'll count that. Like I think I've read like unpublished manuscripts by like maybe not this year, but like by my friend Danielle LaFrance, and I read one by Jason Christie one time, and maybe there's someone else back in that decade that was somebody's handed me a manuscript and I read it and counted it, but I have no trouble counting that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'll read manuscripts people give me. I won't use my own manuscripts, but like I'll read like if I read a manuscript, which I did read one this year.
Yeah.
At least one anyway that I counted. But for screenwriting, I don't know why I just have this weird mental block about it. But I did count some of them.
Maybe because a manuscript you can imagine as a book, but like a screenplay you have to imagine as a movie.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, once in a while they'll publish a screenplay, but for the most part, like I read The Witch, the screenplay to The Witch, which has not been published to the best of my knowledge, and so I did end up counting it. But I don't know. Screenplays are also horrible things to read, so maybe that's the other reason. What else is on your big list of like awesome things?
Let me talk about something that that maybe is like super obvious, because I feel like it was on a ton of people's lists last year. So I've been complaining to anybody who will listen, probably like annoyingly, about like the way that like hype around books has like intensified with social media. Sure. So like, and like I found like it's actually like ruined books for me.
Because everyone's going crazy about how great they are or how horrible
they are. So
there's
like
no in between, right?
So like Billy Ray Belcourt's book, which like I'm gonna try to reread in the new year because I suspect it's way better than my first impression of it, is like a book like, because everybody was hyping it to high heaven, I had real trouble. Like I kind of bounced off it a little bit.
Sure. Like
this isn't that great. But every time I read individual poems from it, like online, I go, yeah, this is actually really good. So sure. I've been trying to like set books aside. But one of those books that was hyped to high heaven, that maybe is one of the best books that I read this year, is Katerina Vermette's The Break.
I gotta read that book. I read her new poetry book, but I haven't read earlier poetry book, but I haven't read this one.
Yeah, I read the new poetry book too, because you sent it to me in the mail, and it's good.
Eden Robinson was telling me about how good that novel was. So like at that point, I gotta read it.
So this novel. So the course I taught at UTSC this semester was on CanLit and the city. And if I had read this novel would be on the syllabus. If I had read it when I was planning the course. So the novel is about like this family who, in the aftermath of one of their daughters gets sexually assaulted, and another member of the family watches it happen, like anonymously from their kitchen window. So the book is about this family kind of negotiating the aftermath of this. But what it does that kind of pushes it over the top for me is the way in every scene, the state is on the margins of things that are happening. Like it doesn't play out, like there's no scene where like family services comes in and takes someone, but the threat of it is like constantly there. And I found that really like as a novel about like the urban and like Winnipeg as a kind of indigenous city, but also like as policed in a certain way. Like I found it really, I don't want to say like eye-opening, because that feels like that feels a bit cliche to talk about, but I felt like it did like this really elegant mapping of how these intimacies play out against these state structures.
That's interesting.
And it's just like really well written. It's like a book that like I could see all this pressure being put on it for me with this kind of hype machine, and then it held all that weight for me.
Now, let me ask you a couple questions about it, because I've been interested in it, but I haven't read it yet. So one, I understand that it cycles through a bunch of different narrators. Is that true?
Yeah.
Like 20 some narrators, like something ridiculous.
I don't know if it's that many, but like it is a lot
Hmm.
of narrators, and
And,
most of them are members of this family, right?
and so do you ever get like scenes from repeated from different perspectives in that structure? Or is it
Yes.
linear? Oh, you do? Okay. Then I have to read it for
Yeah.
sure because I'm specifically looking for those kinds of books right now. Okay, I gotta write that down. I'll do it when we're done. I'll
Yeah.
write it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
I
We can
got a
talk about that
recording, I
after.
guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting.
And that was part of that. Like, I decided to read more novels, so it kind of it got thrown on the pile because it was a city novel.
I'm trying to think what the best novel I read this year was. I was very disappointed in a couple of novels I read. But I'm trying to think of what the best one was that I read. Probably, I was really interested in this book by Laird Hunt
Okay.
called In the House in the Dark of the Woods.
Okay.
And it's a strange sort of nightmare version of, I don't know what you call it. It has this weird sort of like folktale sort of style, blended with like a surreal, kind of nightmarish, you know, weird. There's this weird game slash dream like nightmare unfolding in this wood near where these characters live in around New England, and in the Victorian age, if I recall correctly. I have to double check it, but it's just a bizarre and strange,
Okay.
interesting, weird book. So it had like certain weaknesses, but I was pretty interested in how well it kind of moved through a few things I don't normally like in books, like having a nameless narrator, which I don't typically like. He actually had a narrator whose name kept changing depending on which position she occupied in the weird game structure of this
Okay.
nightmare, this surreal kind of nightmare scenario. Is really kind of interesting and strange. It's like on one level, it's just about it's a book about New England witches. But on another level, it's a very bizarre and surreal, almost Kafka-esque, like, shifting from one sort of position to another in this weird, like, rule-bound game that people are playing, but they don't really understand. And then at the same time, it kind of becomes a strange meditation on, like, psychosis and mental illness.
Oh,
Like, it's a really interesting, hard to pin down book. That I thought that was pretty fascinating. And then Yiddish for Pirates I read finally, which I
okay.
really enjoyed. Gary Barwin's long-awaited novel Yiddish for Pirates, which is narrated by a 500-year-old parrot, and mostly takes place around the time that Christopher Columbus travels across the ocean. And he's actually a character in the book at one point, and it's really really fascinating, funny, and very kind of dark and upsetting book in many respects. Really interesting, strange kind of, I guess the historiographic metafiction about these sort of marginal figures, but these marginal Jewish figures who are involved on the periphery, but still involved in like the colonization, of North America, South America, and so, which is a lot of these ideas are kind of connected to something I'm doing for research into like for a screenplay that I'm supposed to be working on right now, but I'm kind of
But you're
stuck
talking to
on
me instead.
it at the moment. But yeah, but like Yiddish for Pirates, I'd also kind of really recommend. It's a bit more fun than the other book, but they both kind of do some kind of interesting, fun, weird things with the narrative voice. I'm really interested in books that have strange narrative voices,
Okay.
for whatever reason. You got anything on the horizon that you really are gunning to read in the new year? Like, do you have
Let
like
me
a pile made or anything? I've got a
let me
little pile going.
let me turn to my pile. Listeners
Yeah.
can't watch me gesture to my pile that's on the shelf.
If it works, I'll
Uh,
throw the video up on it too, maybe.
Well, I've got like a pile, and then I've got like stuff that I haven't bought yet that I want to read, and stuff that's being delivered to my house presently. So I've got this little pile. It's got some things that I've kind of put off, that I'm putting off because of the hype cycles that I want a bit of distance.
Sure.
So one is that book, Refuse, Tamlet in Ruins.
Yeah, I just got that in the mail, and I am looking forward to checking that out.
Yeah. And I feel like I've read a bunch of it already because a bunch of it is like
You're quoted
online.
in that book. I told you that, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that's one. And as well, on top of that, I haven't bought it yet, but Gwen Benaway's book, Holy Wild, I want to check out, but I can't check it out while everybody's telling me it's great. I need to
Sure. Yeah.
read on my own.
So I
And
should
then,
talk to people. That's my solution.
yeah.
I don't talk to people. I don't go on social media. I'm just sitting in my basement recording podcasts. Whoops. Ripping my earphones out. What else you got there in your pile?
Let's see what else. I've got some older stuff that I want to go through. I want to reread or read for the first time. I've got a couple of Sharon Pearl Turner books. I've got some older Margaret Christakis. I kept finding, when I was in Vancouver, I kept finding all these older books by Margaret Christakis that I hadn't read. And so I kept buying them and putting them on my shelf. So I actually want to read some of those. I've got a couple books by a queer poet from the 80s, 90s, Christos, published by Press Gang. I just picked up this book by Jane Jacobs, Vital Little Plants, that I wanted to read a couple of years ago, but didn't because it was $40. I found it remaindered for like $13. So great news for me. I have to go back and read Shane Rhodes's catalog. So I'm writing a paper, and I think he appears in it. I've got a bunch of chapbooks that I picked up at the Toronto Small Press Fair that I want to go through. And then I've got a list of like novels for that novel a week thing. I'm in the middle of like the first book of Austin Clarke's Toronto trilogy. I want to find a copy of Slash by Janet Armstrong. I'm also writing about Croach, so I should probably reread some of Croach's fiction. Yeah, I've got a bunch of stuff like kind of on the horizon. How about you?
I literally, Ryan, it sounds weird because I've been reading 100 books a year.
Yeah.
Or like 95 books plus a year. But I actually have an entire bookshelf that probably has 1,000 books on it that I haven't read.
So you need to either read those or throw them out?
Well, I guess in theory, like if you look at it, if you do the math, then if I don't have another book come into my house, then I could read for 10 years and not quite finish those books. And they all look great. Like I'm dying to read these books. But of course the problem is I keep getting books in the house. Either I'll go buy a new book because some new book comes out, or I get interested in a book, like this Catherine Vermette book maybe, that like, just as an example, like a relatively new book, but let's say a little bit older, and I'll go find that out, right? Or people just mail me books. Like I get all these books sent to me because I review books, and then at the same time, I was just like reviewing books and I get assigned books every once in a while. So I got hundreds of books coming in the house every year. And meanwhile, I've got 1,000 books unread in the house, and I'm only reading. I'm quote unquote only, but I'm only reading 9,500 books a year. So I don't. So on one hand, like I have, like almost all the books I own are unread because I won't keep every book I read. I'll get rid of most books after I read them. I mean, I do keep a bunch, like probably half the books I own I've read, and like, I'm going to go back to it. And also, I might reread some of those books too, right? In terms of the short list of like things I'll read soon, I really want to read. One of the things I read this year was the Grendel Omnibus. Like, there's a old comic character called Grendel that I was fascinated with. It's this very strange, like, comic character that kind of transits between like different. It's kind of hard to explain, but like Grendel is like almost like an anti-hero. Like he's not a hero at all. He's like this villain, but he kind of is the main character of this comic series called Grendel, and And what Matt Wagner is the kind of author of Grendel. What Wagner would do is he would run Grendel for a while, then he would like kill it, and then he would run it then the spirit of Grendel would revive in another character somehow. So it was like this kind of weird thing that transited between characters.
Okay.
And like the actual course of the Grendel story, like was produced over like 30 years and covers like in the story it covers like 1,000 plus thousands of years of human history.
Okay.
It goes all the way, into like some far flung future where like, is a very bizarre, like strange superhero kind of slash. And then the other thing he would do is every, sometimes every issue, but certainly every like comic trajectory would have a totally different art style, a totally different writing style. Like it was he had some, every once in a while, like there would just be some strange formal experiment. Like you'd be reading through like a cycle and then all of a sudden like one issue would just have no words in it. It was just, and like another issue would only have words. He'd have no like real art in it. He would publish like a novel. So it's a very bizarre kind of thing. Anyway, they just published recently these things in omnibus versions. So I just got a hold of like this 3,000 page cycle of like these 4 books, and each of them is like 600 pages long. I read one of them this year, and I've got 3 more to read. And then there's like 2 more that have all the stories that he didn't write, but were done by other artists and writers around Grendel. So my short, just the thing I'm immediately going to get at is Grendel. Like
volume 2.
Volume 2, yeah. And then like I want to get a hold of Theory by Dion Brand, which is the other book she published at the same time as it's a novel, but it came out around the same time as this Blue Clerk book. I'm not sure if they have any real relation, but they have sort of similarly designed covers, and they came out around the same time. And so I'm interested in Dion Brand. So I really want to get a hold of that book.
Like I think it's more of a novel.
It is a novel.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about it. I haven't read a Dion Brand book for a while, other than this like a novel for a while. So that's another one I like right on that I'm excited about. And the other one that I'm really interested in and looking, well, the next 2 I'm going to read is Experimental Film by Gemma Files, which is it's a horror novel.
Okay.
It's called Experimental Film, but it's a horror novel. And Gemma Files is a Canadian horror novelist that I'm getting interested in. And then I'm going to read George Saunders' novel Lincoln in the Bardo, which of course was won the Man Booker Prize if I recall correctly, and it was much hyped. I've read a lot of his. It's his first novel, but his short fiction is exceptional. This novel I have some kind of reservations about, but I haven't started yet, but just kind of hearing about it and going through it at a glance, kind of skimming through it. I'm a bit curious about how it's going to work. It has a very strange... The whole novel is basically told in dialogue sections from different ghostly figures in a graveyard that cycle around Lincoln's dead son. So it looks interesting, and I was really interested in it. Maybe this is perverse, but I was really, really interested in this book, and then it won like this major award, and then I became less interested in it because
no, that makes sense to me.
Like, nothing against people who win these awards or anything, but often when you win those kinds of awards, it means that you produce something less interesting than what you were previously doing. But formally it looks a bit wilder. So I don't know. I'm trying not to get like you were talking about the hype. I've let it have a year or so for the hype to die down. I had just sitting there unread for a while.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I'm kind of, my preconceived notions, I think, have kind of dulled down enough that I think I can check it out. So that's my next, probably one of the next 2 or 3 books I'll read is that for sure. Yeah. What else? You got any last minute recommendations for books or any last minute tips for people thinking of doing this 95 books challenge?
Well, here, let me give you my last minute recommendations without doing like the full explanation, because
Sure.
To prep for this, like I just made this list of like 8 books that I thought like stood out in some way, and I only did 3 of them. But so let me say the other
Talk
the
a
other
little
books.
bit about the rest of them then.
Yeah.
Just let you run on about the rest for a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll try to do them like quick pace. No, although me explaining how I'm going to do them quick pace, that's like that's just a
pace,
delay, right? Because I know that's what people want on these podcasts. They want them to be longer,
long, slow discussions,
more empty content.
Yeah.
That's
I think what
that's
they
why
most
people
want is mouth sounds. So I always try to drink coffee while I'm doing the podcast. I always like
ASMR,
listen to it after.
man.
I'm like, why am I drinking coffee?
No, it's like ASMR. That's what people are actually listening to this for.
Maybe
is like it's like we're lulling them to sleep. They're playing it right before bed, or they just get off on the mouth sound.
I don't understand that ASMR thing. I don't know. The most annoying thing on earth to me is the stuff that they like. I've tried like just out of curiosity check some of these videos, and it's like here's some people sorting paper clips. Like what? No, like I don't want to see that. I don't like amateur things. I'm very at a certain level, I'm very much a elitist about particular things. I try not to be, but at a certain my gut is to why would I watch an amateur video on the internet? Like my gut is I don't want to. Why would I do that when I could pay a bunch of money to see professionals do something like? So I don't really believe that, but it's my instinct at a certain level. So the ASMR thing to me is why wouldn't I pay I'd rather have Gilbert Gottfried for paper clips or something. Get somebody, get a pro who makes paper clips sort them for me or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. So here are these 5 books. So I read Taxi by Helen Podrobenko, which is which I taught this semester but had not read the whole thing. I read 20 pages of it a few years ago for a class I was TAing, and I just went, I'm going to teach this book to force myself to finish reading it.
I do that all the time.
And it's outstanding. It's this book published in the 70s about this woman who drives cab in Vancouver. And so the whole book is her either complaining about her customers or her passengers, or mapping how capitalism works in the 1970s in Vancouver. It's really just this outstanding formal experiment. It's funny, political, great. And Anna Canna Schofield really likes it. So if that's a real recommendation from someone who's not me, take that. The second one is this book, The Ward Uncovered: The Archaeology of Everyday Life, edited by Holly Martell, Michael McClellan, Tatum Taylor, and John Lorink. And it's this bizarre book, color illustrations that just goes through this archaeological dig in Toronto where they found this neighborhood that had basically been paved over and had been a parking lot for however many years. So it's this fascinating thing where they give a history of the place and then just dig through all the detritus. So there'll be there'll be a section that's just an explanation of a cup they found, and it'll historicize this cup. It's really interesting, and it's way more interesting than I thought it would be. When I first moved to Toronto, I was looking for books that had a bit of history to them because I picked it up because I had heard about it. And it was way more fascinating than I thought it would be. The third one is this book by Nicole Broussard from 1970 or 1986 called French Kiss or A Pang's Progress. And it's this kind of typical Nicole Broussard weirdo. Is it a book of poetry? Is it a novel? Who knows? But it's a book about this group of people who are polyamorous, kind of going through the city, and it plays for the whole first half. It plays like a book of poetry, and then at a certain point, you get on page 85, it's like chapter 1, and then it turns into a novel that basically explains what had happened in the first 80 some pages. That these people were like experimenting with polyamory, like, and it's just a brilliant look at Montreal, actually.
That book is that's actually on my list that I'm going to read soon. But I've got a copy. You've got the original book there, I can see. But
Yeah.
I've got a book that Coach House republished her first 3 books, including that one, called As the Blue Books, because all the originals have like just these plain blue covers. So I'm going to check out. So if you can't find that, the Blue Books by Coach House actually is that book and 2 other books by her, all just republished in 1 volume.
Yeah, that's great. Just like get that. So the 4th one is the new Aaron Moray called Sitting Shiva on Minto Avenue by Toots. And it's like, it's a memoir. And like, who would have thought that Aaron Moray should have been writing memoir this whole time? Because it's just this outstanding book about her ex-husband who ended up living in like an SRO in Vancouver. So it's this kind of like book about, it's about him, but it's also a book about memory, and it's about the way cities change, and it's just really beautiful. And it's like it's like she does this thing throughout her career where like she just like 180s everything, and like change and rearticulates how you're supposed to look at her entire oeuvre. And I think this book is like that book again. Like it's Au Citadin, it's Empire York Street, it's Furious. Like this book rearticulates how you're supposed to look at her poetry, even though it's not a poetry book. And then the last one is just this really great book of lyric-y poems by Ali Warren, who's a Bay Area poet, called I Love It Though. I thought I would just read, like, rather than explain
I Love
why
It Though
I
is
like
the
it.
title?
I Love It Though, yeah.
Okay.
I thought I would just like read a little bit from one of these poems, because that's one thing we're not doing, is like reading from these this stuff. Because sometimes a book is good and you don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just read the first stanza from this opening poem called A Yielding Hole for Light. Where were you when the West Antarctic ice sheet began to collapse? On the way to Iowa City to see my first sumac, and coming to know its name and asking. It's the way of coming to know as if revelation instead of simple clarity. I tell BB what I want around me are the ripe and tender ones, wine the color of weather, the lush bearing of our longing, going on in my way, stupidly sincere, 1 foot in the office, the other lolling about in the field. Do you prefer the gravel to the scrub grass? I prefer the ear to the throat, calling choice what's ancient, trained to chew on the cork like it was mine to do with. It's just this nice play of like sincerity and jokiness, and like it's got hints of, like, as I read it, I was like, hints of Jeff Dirksen, like in the way it like will take a song lyric and bend it out of shape a little bit into something else, and just this really great book of lyric poetry that's like but like lyric-y, like not like straightforward.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. It's good to talk to you, and nice to hear about your books. And again, to you listening, go to 95books.com. You'll get all the show notes from this. So all the books Ryan mentioned, I'll just put in a list there and kind of link out. But if you go to 95books.com, that's always where I just have. I just redirect it to different places that I think have the most amount of information about 95 books. And if you want to, read 95 books this year, go right ahead. I would encourage it. If you're on social media, you can use the hashtag 95 books and kind of connect with other people who are doing it. Me and Ryan are going to do it again. And otherwise, have a great week. Keep writing the wrong way. What do you got as a final tip for people who want to read 95 books, Ryan?
John likes to say, don't do the math. I like to say, if you're doing it for the first time, you should do the math. You should figure out what a good pace is. Because I found that really helpful the first year that I did it. I don't do it now because it's a habit. But like figuring out that like, I should read 2 books a week. like is like some kind of weird
Yeah.
like habit building math to it.
All my tips, like I say, are if you can just go to 95books.com and just download an ebook with all my tips. So I'm not going to get into them. But my number one tip is just carry the book in your hand. Read one book at a time and carry the book in your hand. It's shockingly simple to do, and you'll be surprised, how much time you reclaim from like just less fun and interesting things, just because you literally have a book in your hand, and you're like, oh, I could do X, but I've got this book in my hand. I'll just do that instead of whining and moaning while your bus is late. You just look at your book that's in your hand, or it's shockingly simple and really produces like results. That's why I didn't have to like do the math, because I just would carry a book in my hand, and then I just without even trying, I would read 95 books. Like, it sounds dumb and simple, and it's can be a little bit more complicated than that depending on your circumstance and what your life is like, but really that's a big thing. Well, thanks again, Ryan, and good to talk to you. We'll talk to you later. You can hook up with Ryan online. Google hashtag 95books, you'll find him. But otherwise, are you RCF Mod everywhere now?
So
by the way, it's a horrible handle.
Well, and it's just my email. So on Twitter, I'm at Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Instagram it's the same thing. I've got a website now. It's just ryanfitzpatrick.ca.
Oh yeah, she got a website.
Yeah, well, I made one. It sucks.
ryanfitzpatrick.ca.
Yeah, because ryanfitzpatrick.com is unavailable. I don't know if you know, but there's a famous football player that has my name. So if you Google my name, you will not find me.
Well, there you go. ryanfitzpatrick.ca and everywhere online. Ryan Fitzpatrick is the man. Right. Well, thanks. Talk to you later, Ryan.
Yeah, you bet.
My thing's going to explode on here, so I'm going to hang up on you. It's like it's like warning me your Mac will sleep soon, because I guess I blew a fuse.
So you have no battery
left. So I'm
left.
plugged into like a place that's not drawing me any power.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to let you go. But talk to you later, and have a good week, everyone.
Yeah, that was fun.